Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, our Let's Play series against Lieutenant Rainbow Slash. Every time I do the intro, I struggle to not say XTRG because we've been playing Lieutenant Rainbow for maybe about a week in game or so, a couple of months in real life, but we've been playing him for about a week in game, and so, you know, the first 100+ turns of this game we're all playing XTRG, but obviously things are changing with a new opponent now. God damn it. Of course we start off with a nice, fat, juicy light cruiser in the target of the USS Pollock, a submarine here, and it fires some Mark 14s at the cruiser and gets some hits, but no explosions. God damn it. Which really sucks because I think I heard someone say that Lieutenant Rainbow is also playing a game against Battle Group Gamer, another YouTuber, and I think he put torpedoes in multiple Japanese fleet carriers. So of course his Mark 14s explode, mine don't. Anyway, so you can see the Japanese are landing some reinforcements here on Gardner Island near Canton. That could be an attempt to strengthen their position in the Eastern Pacific, or I guess maybe that's more the Central Pacific. In any event, I've been debating launching an attack on Canton. We took Baker Island back a few turns back, but I've been debating going for Canton to try and alleviate the pressure on our supply line, make things a little bit more difficult for him to get a good look at what is being transported from the U.S. West Coast to Australia. And Canton is a pretty convenient place for him to base float planes out of, so it definitely gives him an opportunity to do some forward recon along our supply lines that we can't do a whole lot about, but if I could take Canton back, that would really hinder his ability to sort of see some of that shipping going back and forth. Unfortunately, if he's going to be reinforcing the islands to the west there, that might complicate things, although it is only a dot hex, so it would be pretty difficult for him to build up much more than maybe just a float plane tender and a couple of float planes sort of based out of there. So could still be an easy target. We'll see. I'm not sure what he's all bringing in there. Okay, so we've got a Japanese bombing raid coming in on Batavia here. They've got 12 Bettys and 3 Nels. The good news for us is that their escorts don't appear to be anywhere around, and so we've got a couple of fighters up here attacking enemy bombers that are unescorted. You can see here the P-40s engaging these bombers and doing some damage here, trying to kind of break into the formation. Hopefully we get a couple more P-40s that sort of scramble from the base there to increase our numbers there. It looks like we did lose one of those P-40s, or at least it was damaged, but we did get a couple more up, so they are scrambling. The way this works is you kind of have the on-site cap, but when engagements do occur, you can have your aircraft increase in number as more planes sort of get to the right altitude to engage. So you can see we're ripping apart these Bettys pretty good here. They started out with 12, they're down to 7. We've got 4 Warhawks coming in here now, destroying more of these guys as we go on. So this is a nice little engagement here. Now we're up to 6 here against 9 unescorted enemy bombers. Last turn we did get some easy pickings here with destroying, I think, like 12 or something like that, 12 or 15 Bettys over Mulmon when they were trying to go for a surface task force of ours. And here we at least damaged or destroyed 8 of those Bettys on the way to Batavia with no enemy fighter escorts. We're also engaging them on the way out after they drop their payloads. Also, when bombers do get attacked in the middle of a bombing raid, they will be less accurate with their payloads when they drop their ordnance there. So you can see they did manage to drop their bombs. They did get 1 runway hit. That won't really do much of anything. And we shot down 4 Bettys and damaged 1 more, potentially more than that, depending on what we see here once we get out of the combat results. This is affected by fog of war. So at the end of the day, we got 5 Warhawks to engage these 15 bombers, and we knocked down 4 to 5 of these enemy aircraft. So that's a pretty good result. Second raid coming in here with 6 G3M Nels, so it looks like their raid was a little bit scattered here. We're trying to get up and engage these guys. The cap does sort of get less effective over time as they kind of get stretched and they run out of fuel, they run out of ammo, things like that. But you can see it looks like we got 1 Nel right away. One of our Warhawks in there had a gun jam. The Hurricane looks like it had some hydraulic problems, but we got a second Nell on the way out from the target, and so we're going to butcher some more bombers here today. Good results there. At least 2 enemy bombers, at least according to this combat result, and 1 damaged. The post result says 1 and 1, so we'll have to see what that looks like once we get out of the turn replay here. But another bad day for Japanese naval bombers, just like last turn. So some uncontested bombing of some of our troops north of Moresby, some Japanese B5N1 Kates hitting our troops at Ambon, which is cut off and low on supply. Looks like these guys, does it say where they're coming from? Does it say what their group was? It might have during the combat result. I skipped through it though. JJ Binks, thanks for the follow. All right, 13 Sallies hitting some of our troops that are isolated here in Borneo. 17 Lilies hitting our troops to the north of Moresby. 27 bombers hitting our troops here in Sumatra. Doing some casualties there. Those troops have nowhere to retreat to either, so they're all going to die. I mean, this is good experience for him. He's able to sort of get his crews basically free and risk-free practice, if you will, that helps their experience and replaces casualties. He needs to do that because he's lost over 100, I think maybe even over 200 Sally bombers. He lost like 100 Sallies in like 2 days over Singapore when XTRG was running the show. So Japan can much more easily replace their pilot losses than historical by setting up some training programs back in the home islands. But those kind of early losses in the first week of the war will still hurt. So anything he can do to get sort of free bombing attacks on isolated detachments like you're seeing here are going to be good for him. It'll be interesting to see if our battleships make it out of Mulman. We bombarded their last turn. I ordered them to pull back toward was it Colombo? Or yeah, I think Colombo. I ordered them to pull back to Colombo at flank speed, so they're probably somewhere in the Bay of Bengal, but hopefully out of range of Japanese bombers in the Burma theater. Meanwhile, you can see him bombing our troops at Clark Field, where we launched a bloody attack last turn that was unfortunately repulsed. Our counterattack coming up just short in the Philippines. That attack was very nearly successful. We had 1 to 2 attack odds. If we had gotten 1 to 1, we would have actually reduced the enemy forts and then likely had even more success next turn. Unfortunately, it wasn't successful just by the skin of our teeth, and we took a bit of a pounding there. We'll have no real chance to drive them back at this point. But yeah, it does look like he did order some fighter escorts, or at least fighter sweeps over Batavia, because you can see even though the bombers came in unescorted in the morning, we're into the PM air operation phase, and he's sweeping over Batavia with some zeros. So we did get some easy free kills early in the turn, but I think we're probably going to take some punches to the nose here in the PM phase of the turn. Even if we lose 5 or 6 fighters, I still think it's worth, 10 or so enemy bombers, but we'll see here. Okay, 1 Japanese zero shot down, no allied losses in that first phase. That's a pretty damn good result, if I have to say for myself. Second flight of zeros coming in, this time just against Warhawks, no top cover from the Hurricanes. And the zeros are diving on our Warhawks here, on our P-40s. Looks like they lost 1 more zero, but we lost at least 1 Warhawk. And a third sweep coming in here just on the lone Warhawk. And doesn't look like we did any damage to them and lost that Warhawk. So their fighters did swat down our cap there, so that it's all gone now in the PM phase. Hopefully none of those experienced pilots who got all those kills in the AM phase were flying in the PM phase. Game does start in December 7th, that guy from college. How much time have I put into this particular game? I mean, we're on April 3rd, 1942. So we've been playing this particular PBEM, or play by email game, for about just shy of 2 years, I think. Or we just passed 2 years? I can't even remember. I think it started in 2019, fall of 20, or maybe it was 2018. God, I can't even remember anymore. But the pace that we're playing at is much slower than I think what most people play at. We're doing like 1 turn a week, or 1 turn every 2, or maybe 2 turns a week. So in terms of like 1 turn equaling 1 real life day, that's pretty slow. But the main reason for that is just that I've been playing against other YouTubers, and so to that extent, I don't want to make every one of my videos on my channel a War in the Pacific video. So a lot of people who play this, regularly do at least 1 turn a day, so they can make a lot more progress over 2 years than I have so far. But it has been a while, yeah. Sea Raven firing 4 torpedoes at Japanese destroyers here in the Java Sea. They all missed, and now she's going to get depth charged. No damage, though. I'm assuming the Kurusho, which it's claiming has heavy damage, is the destroyer we saw the Japanese take. Well, was it a destroyer? I know we saw an indicator that a Japanese warship was hit by a mine, so I'm assuming that's the Kurusho. She probably took a mine hit and is pulling out. We tried to fire a torpedo at her and missed. Also, that guy from college, there are other scenarios. So there is a December 7th start date where you can edit your troops before the actual historical attacks. There's one that starts on December 8th. There's a South Pacific campaign if you just want to look at like the Guadalcanal campaign in a much more confined couple of month period. And then there's also like a 1942, 44. There's a bunch of different start dates as well as limited campaigns. Like there's scenarios that let you play just the Marianas campaign in 44 and other things like that. So you don't have to do the grand campaign that takes forever to play either. All right, so you can see the Japanese are bombarding at Quilin. They're still trying to wear us down there. They've got several divisions there, but their bombardments don't seem to be doing much. They're losing more than they ever inflict on us, and presumably lots of artillery bombardments also burns through a lot of Japanese supply. And so that's not, I don't think that's good for them. Meanwhile, one of our isolated detachments here near Changsha just got obliterated, but there were only 138 more men left in that, so not a big deal. Japanese are attacking 4 units here that were pushed out of Sabang a turn or 2 ago with 2 regiments. And so you can see that they did continue to drive them back. I guess they must be falling back towards Siblanga. But you can see here they hurt them pretty bad. 4 units retreating, 1,200 casualties. Another Japanese regiment here attacking to the west of Demjabi. They did drive that Dutch unit back, which was in a little bit better shape here. You still see 4-to-1 odds. Japanese suffered a few casualties, 22 squads disabled. We lost 26 squads destroyed and a pretty bad defeat. Palmyra base force attacked by Japanese Naval Guard units being driven north. So the Sumatra force is all being driven back basically toward Padang, and then that other base up further north that I already forgot the name on. So Sumatra is almost entirely in Japanese control. We still have strong points at Batavia, though. Meanwhile, apparently I forgot to turn off the bombardment attack, so we are bombarding 2 Japanese divisions at Clark Field. The 16th Division is a little bit better than 50% strength, you can see here, based on the attack value here. So this division is pretty badly bloodied. It's basically 2 regiments now. It's at about 50% strength. The other division's closer to about 75% strength based on that bombardment report, and apparently our bombardment does more damage to them than they on us. The primary problem there is I don't have enough supply to really continue any kind of bombardments or follow-on attacks or other things like that. So as much as I would like to attack and continue to press them and try and do some damage, it'll just result in decreasing, you know, eroding returns on those attacks and wearing us down and not really hurting the enemy at all. Another division driven back here in Sumatra near Medan. Japanese attack at Antom to the west of Fiji here. I believe this is another dot base, so not really a meaningful loss here, although it at least shores their position up there. Gardner Island here to the southwest of Canton also being attacked. And then at Wayago here on the northwest tip of New Guinea. Lake G, man, that kind of depends on your definition of easy. The Japanese are easier to play as in the early war phase because they've got much more striking power and they're ready for war. The Allies over the course of a campaign become much easier as they start to ramp up their production. Playing as the Japanese does entail managing their economy, which can be kind of a gargantuan task. I think there's ways you can turn the economy off, but I'm not entirely sure. Meanwhile, we've got a bunch of ships that are entering their refit phases here, some destroyers, some battleships, some submarines here, all getting refits that they're due so they can get things like radar and better anti-aircraft and better anti-submarine technology and all these other kind of things. So we'll be taking a bunch of ships out of service for the next 10 to 20 days or so in a lot of cases so they can get some badly needed upgrades and upgrade from sort of pre-war tech to war tech. One of the things that I really enjoy about War in the Pacific, outside of the game itself, is I massively prefer the WWII turns, where basically both sides issue their orders at the same time, and then they're resolved at they issue their orders on their own, but then the orders are resolved in real time or simultaneously, I guess, not real time. So that way you don't have like I go then you go. I hate I go you go, or I go, you go, or whatever, where you do your turn, you get the results. The other side does their turn, get the results. In this, you do your turn, they do their turn, results come out at the same time. And that, I think, drives much more realistic and accurate feeling combat results, where it's not always one side pushing the initiative for a half a turn and then the other side. Okay, so let's take a look first at the intelligence briefing. Intelligence briefing is claiming the Japanese lost 13 aircraft in air-to-air, 1 by flak, 6 by op losses. So that would be 20 aircraft to the Allies' 5. We lost 3 aircraft in air-to-air, 2 in operational losses. We're claiming 12, and again, remember, this is all colored by fog of war, so this could be inaccurate. But we are claiming 12 more Bettys shot down this turn. So I think last turn they lost like 16 of them. So between the 2 days, they lost better than a full squadron of bombers. So 12 Bettys shot down, 11 air-to-air, 1 op loss, probably was damaged and crashed on landing, 3 G3M Nels, so that's 15 two-engine bombers lost this turn. We're also claiming we shot down 3 Zeros, which is pretty nice, 2 of them in air-to-air combat, 1 op loss, presumably all over Batavia. They lost 2 Kates, 1 to flak, 1 to op loss, probably those units bombing Ambon. We did lose 2 Warhawks, so 2 P-40s, both to air-to-air combat. And then a bunch of other operational losses down the tally there. So 20 to 5 in terms of losses this turn. If we take a look at top pilots, we lost 1 pilot wounded in action. That's even better. We didn't lose a single pilot killed in action here. So that is great news for us. We now have a Dutch ace, everybody. We've got our first Dutch ace, L.J. Snowick, a flight officer. He's flown 43 missions, I guess. He has 5 kills, and he's flying with P-40s out of the 1V or 16GV squadron in Batavia here. So they only have 2 serviceable aircraft at the moment after all of this fighting here, but they do have an ace. So the Dutch have an ace. They also have another pilot who's at 4 kills, so pretty close to an ace. A Berk, another flight officer, both of them with better than 70 experience. Those are pretty darn good pilots currently in this group, although they don't have a lot of airframes left that they can use. If we take a look at anybody else, I don't think anybody else is really flying a whole lot in terms of getting kills or anything like that. So the 1 Dutch ace, we do have 1 British ace who's flying Hurricanes, Jay Parker. And then we also have a New Zealand ace flying Hurricanes out of the 488th Squadron in the RAF, J.R. Hutchinson. And I suspect these guys are based at Lasho, but I suspect one of those guys was made an ace the turn before in the massacre over at Molmun. So good news there. Meanwhile, our battleships are pulling back. You can see here they're on their way back to where are they going? Colombo on Sri Lanka. And you can see here, I'm turning them out of flank speed mode to mission speed because they don't have enough fuel to run flank the entire time. Also, they will take a lot of systems damage if I run them flank the entire time. This is the bombardment task force that hit Molmun last turn, and they are currently pulling back. I think they're safely out of range, not of Tavoy, but probably they're at max range, basically at Victoria Point, where the Japanese could base some bombers. They are almost at max range for Bangkok. And by the time the sun comes up, there'll be 18 hexes out of both of those because they're going to move 3 more hexes in the night phase. So they should be out of range for any enemy bombers that might be able to hit them with torpedoes, unless the Japanese send any shipping up the Strait of Malacca. I have set up some flights, some patrol aircraft here at Port Blair. We actually have 6 Catalinas that all have orders to patrol the Strait of Malacca. So we have no indication of enemy Japanese shipping coming up the Strait of Malacca. We did have some intel reports which suggested the Japanese were going to land some engineers on Port Blair. But so far, and I mean, they could be here, they could be undetected, but so far, no indication of those ships. We have a British carrier here, which is pulling back to Colombo as well to refuel, the Formidable, with 3 destroyer escorts. She would not fare well against any Japanese carriers, but in the event that the Japanese are just, sending some light forces up to land at Port Blair, she'd be very useful. Additionally, we do have some heavy cruisers here, 3 heavy cruisers, which had bombarded Port Blair a few turns ago, and 3 light cruisers, which we could use to screen Port Blair, but Port Blair is too far out into the Andaman Sea to effectively have any kind of cap over it outside of with a carrier. And so if the Japanese do send any kind of task force north with carriers, we're kind of screwed no matter what. If they do send just surface warships, these 3 cruisers might surprise them. I do currently have them set to go to Molmun, perhaps to bombard to sort of follow up on the attack there. But I'm not sure if we'll keep those orders. We could change them over to surface combat too. By the way, Whirlwind Hunter, thank you for the bits. Appreciate the support. Time Bandit 45, thanks for the follow. John B. Marine, thank you for the follow. And I think I already thanked you, but JJ Binks, thank you for the follow. Let's see here. So we also have troops unloading at Rangoon. I think most of these guys are fully unloaded here. So this destroyer and one merchant ship here unloaded. This mine laying group is not unloading anything. They're just there patrolling the minefields, making sure everything stays in place. This group is almost fully unloaded as well. And so we'll go ahead and take the empty ships out of the task force, and we'll probably send them north by themselves or with that other group of ships that I just disbanded to get them out of potential range of enemy aircraft sooner rather than later. So that basically means that Rangoon's docks are pretty much empty, which is good news because we have additional shipping that's going to arrive. We've got a medium artillery regiment, which is going to arrive at Rangoon next turn. Again, they could be attacked from Bangkok, although we ravaged what enemy bombers were at Bangkok last turn, so I'm hopeful that they don't have anything to hit me there with. They also haven't detected these guys at all either. Their recon over the area either was stood down or they couldn't detect me because there's heavy rain here. So we do have a heavy artillery battery about to come into Rangoon to begin unloading. We've got an additional almost 100,000, I think it's closer to about 75,000 supplies coming in on 3 cargo task forces. Again, if he sends any carriers into the Andaman Sea, we could be screwed. But I'm hoping that at least for the next day or two, they're safe so they can get into Rangoon and begin unloading their supplies and bolstering the supply situation in the Burma theater, which tends to be a supply sink where supplies just get dumped and then wither away. You can bring supplies in by sea, but the problem is bases at Tavoy, Mulman, Victoria Point can close that shipping lane very easily with medium bombers, with torpedoes. The good news is for us so far, he's really not made any effort to do that. And with our real bloody nose of his bomber force 2 days ago, it's unlikely he'll do that, I think, for at least a couple more turns, but it is something we've got to kind of be mindful of. Our B-17s at Mandalay are standing down to try and repair. They took a lot of systems damage and readiness damage because Mandalay's not a good enough airfield for them really to operate out of, so you got a lot of these aircraft that aren't ready. But they did bomb Mulman in conjunction with that naval bombardment, and so we're getting these planes repaired and trying to get them back up to readiness status. It'll take a couple more days to do. They should be ready by the time those cruisers come around if we do decide to bombard Mulman to kind of hit them there. Can we hit Chiang Mai? I mean, maybe with bombers, but we're not going to do a whole lot of damage. If these are just like recon planes, 20 auxiliary recon planes, we're probably not going to do much of any damage there. It does look like they've got 15 units there. It must almost entirely be like airfield units, building these airfields up to be better. It does say the airfield is expanding. So I'm guessing there's a whole bunch of enemy engineers at Chiang Mai. It is at the end of a railway, so he can definitely supply it. It is outside of the coast, so we can't bombard it. So he may be trying to turn this into sort of the airbase that dominates all of Burma, where he can throw huge air wings into. I'd like to bomb it to slow their production down. We might have to look at doing that. The one good thing about Chiang Mai is it is within P-38 range of Mandalay. So if I did want to base my 38s further north to keep them safe, we could do that and really kind of hurt him and give him a bit of a bloody nose there. Shifting over to China, we didn't see a lot of activity in China this last turn, but the one thing that we really have to be kind of careful about is there is a large force here, 28 units with over 1,000 armored vehicles. This is sort of, he's obviously trying to have some sort of panzer attack. He demolished a corps of ours here just a couple turns ago. He's presumably moving them west to try and cut off Sian. I have ordered pretty much all the troops south of Sian to fall back into the city. I've even ordered most of the troops in Sian to begin falling back north. My intention is to set up a defensive line in the mountains to the north of Sian. It looks like he may have seen that too, because he's moving at least one division west to try and pursue these troops here in the south. But we are pulling these troops back north in the effort to get out of this flanking maneuver. This armored force here moving west is going to be moving into clear terrain. I'm really not going to have anything strong enough to stop a huge swarm of enemy tanks in clear terrain. I need to get into better defensive terrain, which is north of Sian. I hate giving up Sian because it is really an important enemy base, or sorry, friendly base, but I'm not sure that it's defensible at this point because it is in clear terrain and because the fortresses, they're at 3. They could potentially get to 4 before he arrives, but it's still not a great situation. Four defenses in clear terrain, I don't think will hold out much against a huge force of his troops. But you know, I guess we could talk about that. Not a lot else going on in China, as far as I can tell. We had the one unit destroyed near Changsha. We had some bombardment attacks going in Guilin. We do have some troops on the way to reinforce there. We are sending some artillery to the north up toward Kinko and going to send them into the mountains to help hold that line up there. My main fear is that I don't get troops into these mountain hexes in time to build up any sort of defenses, and that he overruns me before I can set my position or before I can get artillery and anti-tank support up there. That is a major risk. And if he does that and we retreat north, then we're isolated from Chongqing, which he could then move down into this valley and clear terrain and sort of blitz us and maybe complete the conquest of central and eastern China. But that's a little ways out of, I'm doing what I can to stop that. Meanwhile, at Bataan, we've got troops that are starting to get low on supply. Most of them are just like artillery or support units. I think we just need to switch these guys over to defend rather than bombard. I really don't want to waste more supply. I don't have a lot of it. We've got about 10,000 supply total in the hex. All the units currently are all except for a couple of artillery regiments have adequate supply, but that's going to change really rapidly here. We don't, we've got a couple of days of supply before things start becoming a problem. You can see here we've got 1,100 assault strength. That's down 300 from before that big attack at the enemy against the enemy at Clark Field. So we did really suffer a pretty big drubbing at the enemy's hands. You can see like the 21st Filipino Army Division, all of the rifle squads are disabled and not able to fight very effectively. Do we have the 31st Infantry Regiment has about a third of its U.S. infantry regiments that are disabled due to that attack. We have a Marine regiment around here somewhere. The 4th Marine Regiment suffered better than 60% casualties, at least in terms of disabled units. So we're really not in a position to continue the attack. Even if I was able or wanted to. Our tank battalion here is actually in better shape. It's still got 42 Stuart light tanks, so that one's not in too bad shape. But overall, it's kind of a difficult situation right now. We do have a lot of enemy shipping at well, we spotted the mini Kiribati at least. 6 enemy carriers at Singapore, or 6 enemy ships. Looks like 4 escorts and 2 light carriers, or 1 fleet carrier, 1 light carrier, and 4 escorts. That could be a little bit off, but it's presumably the mini Kiribati. 68 fighters, 36 bombers at Singapore. It does make me wonder if I should pull these merchant ships back, because if they get stuck at Rangoon, they're fucked. We can get them away now if we move now and just retreat north to the coast of India. But that presumably will be his force that he may shepherd over the landing force headed toward Port Blair. Do you have any other indication of anything else in terms of his shipping? And like, I haven't seen the rest of the fleet carriers in a while. We've seen some of their air groups around, but we haven't seen any of the actual fleet carriers anywhere for a while. Have any more? SIGINT. Planning for an attack on Cyan. That's not really a surprise. I don't see anything about ships, units moving on ships. We do have our own fleet carriers here down in the south, but he's obviously got a big head start on me. Now, the question remains, is he going to stay in Singapore for this turn? Is he waiting for troops to load up, or is he going to start moving north? The flying boats in Batavia? I mean, I've got a few, if that's what you mean. Flying boats. Did they finish pulling out the Gold Battalion? Almost. Looks like just the support and 25 pounders can't get out. The troops in Batavia are up to 1,025 strength there. The Gold Battalion got all of its infantry out. Didn't we have a unit we were trying to pull back? The Southeast Borneo KNIL. Did any of them get to Batavia, or could they not get there because it's not a water hex? I don't see any indication that any of them are being unloaded. Thanks for the follow, Gareth, and Time Bandit. I don't know. I'll have to think on that one a bit. Good news is most of our valuable troop transports got away. The concern is we do have some additional troops which are on their way down with some British infantry brigades somewhere around here. I think these guys are going to be entering the next turn. 2 days there, 2 days, 4 days, 2 days. So we're going to be bringing 2 infantry brigades down, which would be nice to reinforce Rangoon. But if he does bring carriers into the Andaman Sea, that may very quickly shut things down. The problem is that we can't. The problem is this. The mini Kitty Butai is not going to shut down Rangoon by itself. We've got over 100 frontline fighters based out of Rangoon. So we're good there, either at Rangoon or at Pegu. We also have a further 45 or so fighters based at Mandalay, Lashao, and I think we've got another 30 or so in India, 30 in Ceylon, so or in Sri Lanka. So we have no real worry that the mini Kitty Butai by itself, without the fleet carriers, would have any chance of shutting this area down on the coasts. The problem is those are all short-range fighters. They get to about here. Port Blair lacks the needed support to have anything more than a handful of fighters. And so if he moves his fleet carriers up into this area, he can very quickly cut this supply line as long as his ships remain. And then if he takes Port Blair itself, or if he bases bombers at Tavoy or Victoria Point, they can reach out and intercept these convoys pretty easily and beyond the range or location where I can provide fighter escort. So really, to cover the central portion of water in here in the Bay of Bengal and Andaman Sea, I need carriers. The problem is I can't get carriers too and close to Thailand, or he'll base a huge amount of bombers at Bangkok and sink them. I can probably, if I had carriers, put them here, stop the mini Kitty Butai. But if he brings the main Kitty Butai in, then we get overwhelmed and destroyed, and that's bad too. So this is going to be a major point we've got to kind of think through and figure out how to proceed, because I think the next major challenge, I think the next major engagement, especially now that we've sighted the mini Kitty Butai down here at Singapore, and we have intelligence that the Japanese are planning to land engineers on Port Blair to supplement their paratroopers, which have landed but can't take the base by themselves. I think what that's telling us is the next major clash, if we choose to oppose them, could be in the Andaman Sea or the Bay of Bengal. But again, our fleet carriers currently are too far away, all the way down here, southwest of Java. And when they do get up there, they're going to need to spend at least a turn refueling at Colombo, because they're going to be using up a bunch of their fuel. And then the other problem is, if we engage the mini Kitty Butai, if the main carriers are nearby, that could just be bait that he uses to say, look, I've got my light carriers here, please engage me. And then I do that, and then his fleet carriers come and hit me. So there's a lot of sort of planning that's going to have to go into this. And the funny thing is, we're probably one real life month out from learning anything about this, because it's probably at least 2 days before, 2 to 3 days at a minimum, before he could land at Port Blair, and probably probably 6 to 7 days for my own carriers to get into the area, and then my own merchant ships up here to get into the area. So we're probably talking 7 to 10 days before any kind of resolution in this theater. And that's probably a month of real life time before that's anything's gonna come. I think that's one of the really cool things about War in the Pacific, is it really shows you how every major engagement requires a lot of moving pieces to come together to even make it possible to stop an enemy drive, or for the enemy to make a drive. And so there's a lot of time and thought and planning that has to go into each one of these engagements that a lot of tactical war games don't really show you. And a lot of top-level strategic games are so abstract that you never feel that. And I think that's what really makes War in the Pacific very unique in the wargaming space, is that you just have a lot of that stuff going on. And yes, it's slow, but that's also what really makes it such a great storytelling experience, because all of that culminates typically in a 5 to 10 minute real lifetime battle in the game on one turn that can make a ton of, time and effort worth it, or can break your heart. And so from like a storytelling perspective, I really think this game, especially playing against humans, when you're playing multiplayer, it's really one of a kind. Anyway, So that's what's going on in India, in China, in the Dutch East Indies. We kind of already showed you that Batavia is at about 1,000 assault value. The fort's at 92%. So about 8 more days for that to be completed. I don't know that we'll have 8 days. I'm sure he's going to drive back this mobile battalion here this next turn. That probably means 3 days for his troops to show up at Batavia, maybe 4. So we'll probably end up just shy of being able to get to a level 4 fort, but we'll see. Maybe he'll be a little bit more cautious there. He's also got troops into Tigilap, so we probably need to pull this bomber group out of Tigilap, or they'll get destroyed on the ground. Sora he's got troops around, but no one's moving there yet. No one's attacking it yet. If he only has the 1 division, he might not actually attack at Batavia. He might actually wait a little while. So that could be nice. We do have 56,000 supply there, which is also very nice. Although Batavia itself, I don't think produces any supply without oil. It's got 26,000 fuel, 360 or 370 in oil. It does have factories which will produce some supply there. So until those are damaged, I think we'll keep producing more supply for a little while. Yeah, that's what I mean, Sean Mack. The AI is interesting and challenging to fight against and learn, but it's pretty much going to follow a lot of the historical operations. And so it's a little bit less dynamic than playing a human. All right. But the funny thing is I say that, Sean Mack, and yet a Japanese carrier raid in early 42 into the Indian Ocean is a thing that happened. I think it happened by now. It wasn't April of 42. I think it was like February or March, but like we say that, oh, the AI being scripted to do this is not as interesting. And yet the human player is going to do it on his own also. This is multiplayer TC Armored. Oh, it was April. Okay. Interesting. All right. All right. So we've got some supply that continues to flow into Perth, which is sort of our main hub for supply coming into Australia right now. We've got some troops here that I believe are unloading, an RAF group here. Meanwhile, I also do think I was trying to get some supplies into Darwin. I was a little bit nervous with his air bases on Timor that he might intercept this convoy. He does have it detected to some extent. We're trying to move it in at flank speed. They're going to burn almost all their fuel getting into Darwin, but there's plenty of fuel there to reload these cargo ships. So hopefully we get these light cargo ships here and their 15,000 supply into Darwin to kind of supplement the supply there, get their supply situation back up a bit. Because Darwin, even though it has a railhead that ends in Darwin, does not draw much supply from the east coast of Australia or the west coast of Australia because it's so isolated. So cargo task forces moving through that way are somewhat important. We probably should send something to the Horn Island also. I don't think he has any aircraft based out of Moresby yet. He took Moresby a week or so ago, but when he did, it was in horrible shape, very badly damaged. So maybe we should take this moment to get some extra supply up to Horn Island where we've got a garrison there, but is very low on supplies. So we should probably try and see if we can do that. Our troops north of Moresby keep getting bombed, and they're getting whittled away pretty steadily, although we are trying to pull some of them out via some float planes to just try and save some troops. And so we've already pulled out some independent companies successfully. We've pulled out a bit of the Port Moresby Brigade here. You can see several of the New Guinea rifle units, a couple of them were destroyed, but we do have, it looks like what's left of the brigade just got out this turn because they're either all at Sydney or Cairns. So I guess this is it. This is what's left of the Port Moresby Brigade here, the 14 disabled sections and 4 infantry sections. I guess I don't see them here anymore. Townsville, I think we're pulling some of the 45th Indian Brigade into, so we've got about 200 soldiers there. The bulk of the 45th is still back north of Moresby here. You can see it's got almost 1,000 troops north there. So we are trying to get some of these guys out to deny him some of those victory points of destroying those units, and also so we can kind of salvage some of those units and use them ourselves. The Hermes, meanwhile, is in Moresby, or has made it into Melbourne. She is transporting a group of 18 F4, F3 Wildcats, a light carrier there. So we'll see what we want to do with that, if we want to send those to the Burma Theater also. Meanwhile, we have been trying to build up our bases here on the Fiji line. He did take Anatum this last turn, but it's a dot base, so it's very hard for him to build up. Probably more about making sure we don't put any troops there. Savi is sort of this constant threat in our rib, if you will, on the Fiji line. He doesn't appear to have any float planes there. He had a very small naval guard unit there, so we could probably retake Savi pretty easily, and we should consider doing that soon. it just hasn't been worth dispatching troops for, frankly, lately. Meanwhile, it looks like northwest, so these guys are moving this way. We do have a small force on Baker Island. We retook that from the Japanese. They took Canton Island. They have a small force there, and it looks like they landed some troops here on Gardner Island, which perhaps they're going to build up into a float plane base. You can see a destroyer here. I don't think it's actually moving southeast. I think it was moving southeast into Gardner Island. And I don't know why are these guys moving so close over that way? Those are terrible waypoints. Clear waypoints. You guys are going to get yourself sunk. I mean, I guess we do have a destroyer there that's escorting, but you should not be sailing that close to Japanese-held islands with cargo ships that are, frankly, worth a lot. These are 20 victory value ships and 14, and we don't have a lot of troop transports, and they make 16+ knots. These are valuable ships. I don't want to lose these guys. Fortunately, I don't think he's got any float planes that are operating out of Canton, so he's got no detection. He does not know they're there, despite the clear sky. And I doubt he's sending a raiding party in there. These guys are going to Christmas Island with parts of the Guam base force to help build that island up. I am also trying to build up a strong defensive line here in the sort of central or eastern Pacific at Palmyra and at Christmas Island. Palmyra, we've got, I believe, a Canadian infantry brigade, although it's mostly militia. Well, maybe not at Palmyra. We've got Marines at Palmyra. I think the Canadians are on Christmas Island here, the 13th Canadian Brigade, but they're all militia troops, so they're not very good. Still, it's a fair number of troops. And so we're building this base up in terms of its defenses. Also Palmyra with a couple of Marine defense battalions with some good coastal guns and some good infantry units here. Would at least prevent anything probably less than a regiment being able to take the base. We also put some float planes into Laysan Island here, as well as a float plane tender. So even though the base has no troops on it, we've got basically an anchored float plane tender here, the McFarland, who can draw its own supply to keep these 4 Catalinas flying, so we can get good recon over Midway, which may be a good target for an initial counterattack against the Japanese as well. I'm not sure there's a lot else to show you guys this turn. I have been trying to get some more troop transports and things like that into San Diego because we do have some troops there that are ready to move to the front. We've got the 7th and 9th Marine Regiments, which have arrived, and they're assigned to the Pacific Ocean Area's headquarters, so they can move forward. With 140 assault value, these are good units. Their replacements are turned on, so they can draw replacements. We also have the Rocky Mountain Ranger Battalion here, another Canadian unit. Their headquarters is currently restricted. We could change it, but at the moment, I don't see the point in bringing more Canadian militia into the Pacific at this time. We've got the 194th Tank Battalion here, which has 19 Stuart tanks. It is trying to draw replacements, though, so it should get up to around 60 tanks and once it's sort of up to full complement. And then we also have a Combat Engineer Battalion here, which also is drawing replacements, or actually it's not drawing replacements. It's near full strength right now. The motorized support's low. The support is low, but they've actually got more than their TOE says for combat engineers, so that's nice, and they're assigned to Pacific Ocean areas, and then a couple of base forces and stuff like that. Additionally, at Los Angeles, I do have a division which I've been kind of waiting to change its headquarters on. The 27th Infantry Division here. We have enough points here to shift this guy's headquarter to something that's unrestricted, so we can get it off the West Coast. The problem is at the moment I don't have any shipping to actually get it out of San Diego, and so getting another division to the front is critical. But I also can't really do anything with that right now because I don't have the shipping there. So we do have shipping on the way to San Diego. It's just not there yet. The Hornet is at Pearl Harbor. She's our one fleet carrier that's not with those carriers off the Australian coast, and she is entering refits. So for the next 5 days, she'll be upgrading her facilities to, I believe, switching some of its guns out of, I think there were 50 caliber machine guns are being replaced with 24 20mm Oerlikon AA guns, and the radar may or may not have been new, but basically an upgrade to its close-in anti-aircraft against enemy bombers when they get in close. So that's a nice upgrade for her. She has another one in July, but we're still obviously a little ways away from that. And then if we take a look on the in South Africa, we have 2 battleships still under repair there. We've got the Repulse and the Prince of Wales. I like to check in on them almost every day. They were not sunk off the coast of Malaya. And the Repulse is about 34 days away from being back ready for combat. She has some major flood and engine damage. We could probably press her into combat right now if we actually absolutely had to. The system's damage is probably a bit high. We want to get that down, but she doesn't have to be in the shipyard to repair that. The 3 major flood and float damage, or flood and engine damage, has to be in a shipyard. But in any event, she's about a month away. The Prince of Wales is still a ways out, 255 days, but hey, at least she didn't sink. So that's that. In terms of ships coming online, ship availability, in terms of what's coming next, let's see here. Looks like we get a cargo ship, the American Legion, at Balboa next turn, which will be nice. That's near the Panama Canal, so we can send that north to San Diego to help with that division. 2 days from now, we've got a minesweeper. 3 days from now, we've got some merchant, or I guess mine layer tenders. Cargo ship in 4 days, a couple of destroyers in 5 days. Heavy cruiser in 11 days, light cruiser in 11 days, some more minesweepers, cargo ships, troop transports, quite a bit of stuff coming in 11 days. And then another carrier, the Illustrious, in 24 days. So that's the situation there. Don't think I've got a lot else to show you guys. This is an interesting turn, especially with the discovery of these Japanese carriers, but not a lot else to highlight this particular turn. So with that being said, that's going to do it for today's episode of War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, in my Let's Play series, playing as the Allies against Lieutenant Rainbow Slash's Japanese forces. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying, as always, thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm out.